Well, good morning. That was a good worship, wasn't it? I could feel God moving. Well, last week, Pastor said he was going in to have his foot looked after, and he asked me to speak this morning, and I was more than glad to. And that it's been a week of thinking and talking to God and wanting to know exactly. But I had a couple of people say, "Well, just give your testimony." I can do that, and I will try my best to shove 72 years into a half an hour or so. But I was raised in a Christian home, and I was born. Now, don't look at me that way. I was. I was born in Indianapolis. You could hear the cars rolling from our house on Independence Day. Yeah, Indianapolis. Yeah. So I was born there, and my folks were musicians. My dad played the fiddle, and he played one that he built back in Tennessee when he was just a youngster. Well, he was probably an adult, but he was young at the time. And that he met my mom at a Pentecostal revival, and they got married soon after that. And I had three brothers before me and one after me, and two have passed and gone on, but to be with God. And the other two live here in the area, and there was the five of us. And I could remember back when I was a youngster that my mom and dad would have prayer meetings in our home. And they would put a chair in the middle of the living room. Evidently it was wintertime because it was close to the stove. We had a little coal burner. Well, you burn wood in it too, I suppose, but Dad burned coal in it. And we would have prayer meetings. We have a chair sitting there, and whoever needed prayer would sit in that chair, and we would stand in a circle. Of course, I was just a youngster, and but we'd have prayer meetings around that chair and pray for ones that needed to be healed or prayed for certain situations. We had a big old upright piano in our home, and my mom played that, and my dad played the fiddle. And as we grew a little older, we learned other instruments. But we moved from there to California. Anybody know the Route 66? Yeah, well, we drove that from one end to the other because that's where it begins, up there in Indiana, Chicago area or whatever. And we drove that all the way through to where it ended there in California back in 1952. Big old Dodge suburban type frame, Woody, Dodge Woody. And I looked it up one time. They only made 200 of them. Yeah, my dad was lucky to have one of those. But we moved to California, and we started living on a half acre of land would be really hard to get a hold of now in that area. And we raised chickens and turkeys and all that stuff, and kind of lived on our own. Besides my dad working at Douglas Aircraft, Long Beach. But we grew up there until 1957. Then we moved a couple miles from there to Lakewood home, and lived there the rest of my time until after I went in the service. But when I was around 12, I really got interested in music. Even though we went to church and we never missed a Sunday night, my mom and dad would take us all to up to a radio program on Sunday morning a lot of times. And it was a talent contest for 2 hours, and my two older brothers, not the oldest one, but the two older ones, would sing on that program. And they would practice at home hour after hour after hour. They'd practice after I go to bed. And it was even then I was starting to learn how to harmonize and how to catch the rhythm and to be able to change. I already knew what it was to change chords. You know, from one chord, each key has several different chords in it, and I was already in my head hearing that. I could hear the changes. And they never won, but they won second place one time. But most of the time we went to church, and we played there. And the first instrument I ever played in a church was the mandolin, because the guitar was a little too big, and there wasn't another guitar anyways. My older brother played that. It was a Sears guitar. Back then you could order a guitar from Sears, and it was called a Silvertone. If you see one of those guitars in a shop anywhere, they're worth a lot of money today. Silvertone. Yeah, you see Silvertone written on. Now, several different companies built Silvertones for Sears. So, but anyways, they're worth a lot of bucks. And I gave a couple of them away. I couldn't believe it. But when I was 12, I started playing on that old Silvertone, and at that time, it seems like 12 seems to be the age where kids have the ability to understand, yourself and between you and yourself and God. They understand, and that could be why, Jesus was preaching, at a young age, and I could see already that God had given me something, even though I had what you would call a disability, in somewhat, because when I was young, or maybe when I was born, the doctors are undecided about it, if it was when I was born or when I had scarlet fever, but I never had hearing in this right ear. And I've never had that. I've never known what it is to listen to stereo or surround sound and such things as that. So when I sit on stage, I always sit on the right, so everything is clear to me on the left. So I like to sit on the right side of the stage as much as possible. I started singing, and then my mom and dad said, well, help us sing. My mom and dad could sing. My dad was from Tennessee, and man, he could sing. He sounded more like Roy Acuff than Roy Acuff did. He had a great voice. My mom would sing an alto with him, and I would sing a bass, and my older brother Norman would sing like a tenor. He played guitar, and so we sing together as a family, and we found ourselves in a different church every weekend there for a long time. And we would go different places and sing. And my dad would preach. He was a uh, on fire Pentecostal preacher. And if people knew him when we would come into a church just to visit, if they knew him, he was the one they would ask to give prayer over the service or for healing. He was great, and he would get so anointed sometimes, and he would sometimes shake his head, and you could see him take his tongue and catch his teeth before they fell out of his head. And he was quite a man, and of course I miss him. And I wasn't there, but I will tell the story. I was in the Army by then, but I'll tell the story. It's a short one. My dad was preaching at a church, and his teeth just went out, and they fell on the floor right in front of, I don't know, maybe 30 people. And there his teeth lit on the floor. I said, well, what did you do? He says, I picked them up and put them back in. But that was my dad, and he would he could preach up a storm, and he was a violin maker, what we call a fiddle maker, because that's the way we played it. I heard a kid say one time there was the difference between the violin and a fiddle is that a fiddle has strings, and a violin has strings, and a fiddle has strings. Oh, but he would play, and he one of his favorite was "I'll Fly Away," and he played old hoedowns too, as well as the gospel music. He was quite a player. Anyways, we went from church to church, and we would play and play and play. And God seemed to move in all those, in almost every service you could see where people were being touched and being healed. And then I went into the service, and I was out a guitar there for a little bit. I was hardly ever without one. After I got one for Christmas, my folks gave me. I have to bring it sometime and let you guys see it. I still have that guitar, and but I went into the service, and anybody know what a service club is for the Army? It's not a club. It's not a place where you sit and order alcoholic drinks and sit around and eat pretzels and beer and stuff. That's not what it is. A service club is a recreational building where you can go and check out books, check out Bibles, check out instruments. You can go into the music room. There'll be a piano there. They had a room for pool tables, and they had a huge hall for shows. And so that particular base had 2 service clubs. And I had just gotten off of a bivouac, and I had just gotten back on base, and I went to the service club would have dances. They didn't have big band like like Jimmy Dorsey would play, or yeah, and so I went there, and I knew it was just God touching me. I'm telling you. I walked in there, and there was this girl off a little bit there, and I could see her, and I said, "Man, that's it. That's the one." And I hadn't even talked to her. Didn't know her name. Didn't know anything. Didn't even know anything was going to be that night. But this girl came up to me, and a Lay's Choice, and asked me to dance. And and there she blamed it on somebody else. But my beautiful wife now, and we've been together 51 years, and that's where I met her, at one of those dances. And I bought a car that didn't last long because I got orders to Vietnam, and then the day after I proposed, I got up the day after I proposed. I got up that morning, and they gave me orders for Vietnam. So I had this car, and I couldn't leave it. So I took and sold it, and I used all that money to buy a engagement ring. So she wears her car on her finger. So so I went to Vietnam, and that was quite an experience. I was there 9 months. I wasn't there like a full year, because my 3 years, that's what I was in for, 3 years. And I wound up playing for a band on the way over, and they had a contest where they had lots of bands, and we won. And I was playing an upright bass for that particular band. I played that, and we were a bluegrass, country, rock band, kind of. Anyways, we won the program, and so we were the ship's band for the whole 19 days. And we even played for the officers had a Halloween party. It was in October. They had a Halloween party, and we played for that. But it seemed like wherever I went, music would always follow. Even though I was a what you call a direct support, automotive repair. Direct support means you fix them anywhere. You're out in the field, in a ditch, or somewhere under a tent or in a building. No matter where it is, you fixed it, or you would haul it in and get it fixed. And so, but the music always followed me, and I wound up in Vietnam. And so I was playing. There was about 3 of us at the time, and we would play on certain nights there in our little area there. And then I was called out one morning, and I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. You know, when you're called out, you know there's something going on. And they called me out and wanted me to play our band, which by then I think there was 4 of us. And they wanted us to play for the hospital and for the the ones that were further out into the jungles, we would go play there. Once or twice we did that. Yeah. But we would go to the hospital and we would play. And it was heartbreaking in a way because you go and you come back the next week and there'd be some of them that were there would be gone. They had passed away. And but when we would go, we would sing gospel music, and we would sing whatever else they would want. We would try and play for them, and and afterwards we get done, and then we would go around and talk with them, even though we were soldiers just as well as they were. But we would go around and talk with them, and they would, some of them would ask for prayer, and we would pray for them. We'd pray with them. So I wound up doing that. And then I was called out again one morning, and I was supposed to report to the chaplain. So I went to the chaplain. He wanted me to play. He asked me if I could play an organ. Well, I had to learn to play. When I was a teenager, I was playing a Hammond organ in church. And a girl, Carol Ann Schilling was her name, and she kind of helped me with that because she was playing the organ too. And she helped me with that. And my brother Norman, he knew keyboard and chords very well, and so he taught me. So, anyways, here we are, sitting on top of a hill there in Vietnam, and this chapel. There was a chapel there, and he wanted me to play for the chapel service on Sunday. So I did. I came in and I played there, and I started to leave after service. He says, "Where are you going?" I says, "Well, it's almost lunchtime." He says, "No, we're not done yet." And so he takes this little pump organ and he folds it all up to where it looks like a toolbox almost, an oversized toolbox, and packed it up and put it in the back of the Jeep, and we went out in the middle of nowhere, didn't even see nothing, and I says, he stopped. I says, "Do you know where you're at?" Like you would ask an officer. I said, "You know where you're at?" "Yeah, we're here." He said, "Just wait a minute." And then they all come out. And they wanted to have church service out there in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And so we sat around. They sat around and we set up the organ. And the last thing I wanted to do was to start making noise. Like if someone would shoot me if he hit the wrong note, you know what I'm saying? And there was no volume control on that organ. You played it, it was whatever it sounded. Whatever volume it was, you couldn't set it. And it was scary, but I knew that you could just feel God there. And we sat there and had that service right there in the middle of nothing but jungle. And it was really quite an experience. And so we finished that up, and he let me go after that. And we didn't go back out like that, but I did play for the church services on Sunday. But that was quite an experience. He said, "Well, we don't always do that. Other chaplains do it too." So I was relieved of that duty. It was quite a deal, and but we would play. We'd play at the hospital and in the little areas in that vicinity. It was called Long Bend. Was the area. It's I believe south of Saigon. Uh, Long Bend. Well, you could look it up on a map probably and find out about where. They call it Long Bend because the road kind of swerves around that particular area. So I finally got my orders to go home, and we had one more night of being there, and that was on it was at the airport, at the Saigon airport, and they had a show that night, but you know that show they had gospel music, and I was glad of that because it was hard to get a hold of. Even though you could turn the radio, it wasn't the same. You could turn the radio on to the Vietnam station, but it just wasn't the same. I was glad to get out of that place. And I got home, and I was planning in my head. I was planning to take a train when I got back and I got in California. I got out in Oakland, and I was wanting to take a train all the way to Maryland. That's where my fiance was. But I wanted to go home first. I went home, and lo and behold, God had just dropped this job right into my lap. Couldn't believe it. My dad said, well, they're hiring down at Douglas. And so he told me several times because I wasn't interested in the first time. But I went down there, and I got in line, and I wasn't in line, I don't know, an hour. And I started through the procedures, and by 2 o'clock, I was hired, and I was working for Douglas Aircraft Company there in Long Beach, California. And so here was my dad, and so I called my wife to be, and I told her, and so she flew out. She took a plane and flew out to California, and which was right around now. Yeah, because September. It was in September, and we was to get married. Now this is a mixed up story, and it's always had to be mixed up ever since. I always get mixed up on these dates. And we went down Monday or Tuesday. We got our blood test, but we had to wait for them. So it wasn't until Friday, September 9th, that we could go down and get our license, marriage license. We were going to get married the 10th. I got it right on Saturday. And so we went down there, and lo and behold, the courthouse was closed. It was locked up tighter than. Here we were supposed to get married the next day, and all these invitations, all the cake, and all this other stuff was all ready to go for the next day. And they're closed, and so I called. So we went to a phone booth. Anybody know what a phone booth is? Okay. Hey, well, we went to the phone booth and we called the pastor. He says, oh no, it's admission day, and just getting out of the army, I was going to say something else, but I said, what is admission day? And I didn't know what it was. He says, well, it's just the day California became a state of the Union, and they're closed today. It says you can't. So I'll call you back. He says. So we waited, and he called us back. He says you can't get a license here in California, state of California, until Monday. So he says you got a couple options. He says we can go and do the ceremony tomorrow, and then I'll marry you on Monday. You know, I said that doesn't sound good. and so he says, or you can go to Vegas and get married. You can do that, which would be about 3-hour drive or so, and we kind of looked at each other. We talked over. We decided we would postpone everything until Monday, and by then we were both a jumble of nerves. My wife broke out in hives on Sunday before. It was something else, but we got. Anybody been to Knott's Berry Farm? Anybody? They have what they call Judge Roy Bean. Okay, we got married there. But we still had to wait till Monday. So it was Monday when we got the 12th. Okay. Now there's still no mix up on dates here. That comes later. But the dates get all messed up in my head sometimes. So we got married, and then she had to go back. My wife had to go back to the Fort Meade, Maryland, and she got her papers and discharged, and then she drove to Minnesota to see her family, and then she brought her brother out with her to help her drive from there to here, or to California. I keep thinking I'm still in California sometimes, especially at 92 degrees. So, anyways, we were married, and we started our life together, and then yeah, I was going to mention that, and I left that behind. We got married when the day we got our marriage license. By then I didn't have any money, and so she paid for the marriage license, which was, I can't remember how much it was, $3, something like that. Yeah, and but anyways, we in the next year, the following year, my wife's dad passed away just before New Year's, or New Year's Eve, and we got the call, and we wanted to go back to Minnesota. Here it is, January, and we want to go to Minnesota in January, and so we packed everything up that night. We got the call. We packed everything up. We took them. We threw it in the car. We had a 61 Chevy station wagon, red and white, beautiful thing. And we packed it up, and we got maybe 2 miles, 3 miles down the road, and we were fogged in. Now, at that time, that area was known for a lot of fog because all it was field and dairyland, and oranges. And we had to turn around and go home, and we had to wait until morning. And so then we left. We went to Utah, and that's where her two other brothers. She had two brothers in Utah, and we all got in one car, a Pontiac, and we drove to Minnesota, and we on the way there, my wife whispers into my ear. She says, I think we're going to have a baby. In so many words, and so that was when I first knew that Brenda was going to come along, and so we got back home, and then we had went through the 9 months thing, and then Brenda popped into the world. Yeah. And my wife wasn't playing much. My wife really didn't play an instrument at that time, but she learned. She learned a little while longer here, a little more on the way. But Brenda came along, and then Chucky, you met him. He was here a few weeks ago. He came along. He was born New Year's Day, and then I'll go through these quick because we were so busy working and raising kids, we weren't playing a lot of music yet, and so then little Katie came along, and every one of these, God had seemed to take the burden off of my wife, off of Maxine here, because they were all born very quickly. One was longer than the rest of them, but they were all quick. And and then Paul's down in California. So we had the four, and here Brenda was growing by leaps and bounds, and she wanted to learn how to play the piano, and so we got her music lessons, and we had a piano, an upright piano, and she played that thing. You could hear it down the street. It was so loud. Yeah, I had hardwood floors, and so she started in on that, and when my oldest boy was old enough, he started playing the mandolin and then the guitar. So he was playing both, and then little Katie couldn't play, but she was younger still. She couldn't play, but she could sing, and she was she could sing up a storm when she was like 3 and 4 years old, and we would buy her soundtracks, and she would sing with those soundtracks. And my wife called me one day. She says she can read. I said, what are you talking about? She says, I tell her we want tell her to sing a song, or it was a story. It was a storybook on tape. That's what it was. and 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 uh, and she says she can read them. She knows which ones to get. She knows, and so a couple hours later, my wife calls me and she says she can't read, but there's a little tiny picture on each one that are different for the story. And as an adult, you don't notice it. You're just reading the big title, but they got these little bitty pictures on there, and she was seeing that. And she was good at seeing things and remembering. She has a pretty good photographic mind. She can look at something and remember. But it was then, before Paul was born, we were already uh, starting to play and sing. Brenda was 12, and she was already learning pretty well on the piano. And we went to the rescue mission in Orange County, out a little further out than Disneyland. And we would go there on Wednesday nights. Yeah, once a month. We would go out there, and we had a piano player that would go, Sally. Her name was Sally, and she couldn't go, and so we had Brenda play, and I was apologizing because we didn't have the piano player, and that Brenda had to play, and they said, well, we don't want the piano player, we want her, and so she became our piano player at 12 years old. She was playing, and one night I picked her up, and we were to go, and I picked Brenda up from school, and on the way home she says, Dad, can I preach tonight? Well, yeah, but yeah, I said that, but you wanted. She wanted to preach. So I let her, and she was 12, and we went, and she preached, and she had an altar call, and something like four, I guess it was four that come down for salvation, and one even actually got a job working there at the mission, and went on to work for the Lord. So here we are, not even hardly trying, but God has put us to work without hardly even noticing it. All these things are coming about. We saw it later, but at first it was just. We were just doing what we could do, and so, anyways, so she had done that, and then we got where we could sing. The three of us, myself, Brenda, and Charles. I call him Chucky. I have that right, but. But I could see that something was working, and so we sang as a trio, and Maxine had learned to play the bass, and so she was playing. So Maxine was playing bass in 1975 or something like that. No, a little later than that, maybe. But it was in the 70s or probably the late 70s. But we sang as a trio. I would sing the lead, and Brenda would sing what was you singing? You were singing tenor? Chucky was in there somewhere. but we had this one song that everybody loved to hear us sing, and that was The Angels Will Stand By, and there wasn't a meeting anywhere we went and we couldn't get away without singing that song. Yeah, but it was a, it was, it, you would say, the angels will stand by, and then you'd hear this, stand by, stand by, stand by, and then we go on with the chorus. And it's a beautiful song. I can't sing anymore, but all the kids can sing. Oh, Chucky don't like to sing, but he he also played the mandolin at that time. At that particular time, he learned other instruments as we went along. So we would go these we found ourselves as our family being at a different church every Sunday, and we was from probably Bakersfield all the way down to San Diego somewhere. I think we did a church down there. Uh, every yeah every weekend we were somewhere. Nylon was Nylon was a fun place. I mean, you had fun just chasing the cockroaches, if nothing else. That was just cockroaches there. It's a natural thing. It's like a cat walking across the street. It just yeah they're huge things. Max thing laughed. My wife laughed. They were chasing one off the table, and when it got off the table, it was still running like this. It was up in midair. Uh, they were. It was funny, but we would go there, and every place we went, they treated us so nice, and there's some great memories there. And but we uh, we would sing at our own church, and we would sing for functions at the church, and we were just playing everywhere. We were playing in the band. We um, we we um, we got to playing with another couple, Dennis and Margaret, and we called ourselves the country side of faith, where we did country gospel music, and we must have done that for a couple of years at least. Yeah, you know. And then uh, I don't want to leave anything out. We also sing with a couple uh, for about a year. Um, uh, they call themselves the Sounds of Faith, and we played with them. And so we were just busy. We were busy. God kept us busy, and if we weren't busy, he made sure we were. and and yeah, the East. We went to East LA. Um, and if you know, East LA is East LA. Everything's nailed down to the floor. So we went there, and it was mostly black church, and they wanted us to come and play, and we did. And man, they just roared about us being there. But it scared me because when we went in there, it had this big Hammond organ. All black churches have got to have the Hammond organ, and the Leslie speaker. And I look at that organ, and the organ had two holes in it in the front on the bottom part of it. It had two holes, and there was two holes in the floor, right next to those other two holes. And there was a chain running through the holes, around through the floor, and back up through the organ. They had that thing chained to the floor. They weren't going to lose that thing, and And the pastor says, well, you're welcome to stay all day, because they're going to have music and food. That's why we were there. He says, but we want you to leave before dark. so we left before dark, but uh, those are the kind of places that we would go. Then there was other places. We'd go to Bakersfield, and they every place we went, God always took care of us. He it was then we were noticing that that we were different from other families. That in fact, other families would. I won't go into that too much, but you know that when you carry a talent like that, you know that people will get jealous. And boy, I'll tell you, we have had our time with that. But I won't go into too much of that. But they will, and you haven't done a thing, but just do what God wants you to do. We weren't trying to overtake anything or do anything that would cause a problem. But then we all got bigger. And we went to Minnesota one year, and we went up. Chucky, our oldest boy, he wanted to get a steel guitar, pedal steel. I don't know if you've ever watched country music, you'll see the guy sitting there in a chair who slides that bar across the strings, and he's got these pedals on the floor. And that's called a pedal steel. And he wanted to learn how to play one of those. And he was 15 years old. And there's a lot to playing one of those. It's not like picking up a guitar. I mean, both feet are working, your knees are working, which a lot of people don't notice. But your knees work as well as your feet, because you got pedals on the floor, and you got levers that come down that you push with your knee to move the cam. There's a camshaft that moves up and down on each string. So when you push one of those pedals, that cam rolls up and changes the pitch of the string, and then lets it back down. That's where you get that whining sound, where the string will go up and then back down again, and very expensive. If something goes wrong with one, you better be a good mechanic, because it's all mechanical. There's no electrical in those. It's all mechanical, cables and levers. So anyways, we bought it, and it was what they call a show bud. It's a very known instrument, and he was already playing music on the way home. We had the motorhome, and so he had it set up inside the motorhome, and he would fool with that thing while we were driving down the road. We stopped in Kansas to visit one of our old guitar player friends, and we set it up, and he played a few tunes already on that thing. He'd only had it a few days, so now he's got 3 steel guitars. One's in California, one's in our house, and one's in his house. So no matter where he goes, he's got one somewhere. Yeah. So, Paul was the baby, and he's been a worship leader down in California for several years, and he's in the process of changing jobs at the moment. He plays and sings very well. He he was singing before we knew he could sing. He wouldn't tell nobody, and he wanted to sing stupid so nobody would ask him. Yeah, and so we had to go to a youth meeting to hear our youngest son sing. He wouldn't sing at home, but we went there, and we heard him sing. And then he kind of broke loose a little bit and started. It didn't matter so much to him. Then he got into a couple of bands, and we've all been in bands. Chucky was in a band for 10 years or so. I was in the same band for about a year. One of the guitar player, the lead guitar player, was sick, and he was sick for about a year. He was it took him a year to recuperate. So I played with him, and he wants to play more, but his job won't let him. So that's something you need to pray for him. That I know what that's like, because that's why I skipped. There was this area in our life where all I did was work 10 and 12 hours a day, just to supply all the needs for the family and necessities. So I understand where he's at, but he wants to play more, but he hasn't got the time yet. They don't have any kids, but you know, the way things are not the way they were when I was raised. When I grew up, you could go anywhere and get a good paying job. You can't do that anymore. You have to search. And so they're just starting to roll a little bit now. But to do that, he's working long hours. And, God has always worked very well in our lives. We had 2 miscarriages before Paul, and after that, we thought it was time to put the brakes on that. Maxine was having a high, problem with high blood pressure, and as you get older, it's harder to have kids. Yeah, we had incompatible blood between us, so the boys would wind up in incubator for a few days. The girls seemed to get along with it fine, but the boys, they'd wind up in the incubator. Yeah. So it's kind of like, when you go through life, and as you go through these things and things that you've gone through, you get the rough edges knocked off of you. So anybody ever pick up a stone and that'll skip through the water? You're taking your throw it in the water. The stone. There's only certain ones that'll do that. They won't all do that. It's only the ones that are smooth and flat enough to skip across the water. And I think that's what David was looking at. David and Goliath. It's not that the other stones weren't any good, but he wanted the one that would do the job. Do you want a stone that'll skip once or twice, or you want one that'll skip 4 times? And so those stones, they get smooth. Those stones get smooth as the water flows over them. The stone gets smooth. It takes years for that to happen. You have these stone rollers, where you can put a rock I don't know what you call them, rock, yeah, tumbler, yeah. You know, you smooth the rough edges off, and then as the rough edges get off, then it starts polishing until you get a fine gloss like lacquer on those stones. I don't know where your life is, where you're, if you got enough rough edges knocked off yet. have you got have you got are you ready to be picked up and be used? Are you ready for God to pick you up out of the water, out of the holy water, out of the think of the word, as you're ready to be launched and skipped across the water and do the job He wants you to do. Let the Holy Spirit and the Word of God flow through your life, just like the water flows over the rocks. The Word of God will smooth you out, and you'll be much more calm, much more peaceful, and God has something for you. God has some place where He wants to use the word throw, if you please, toss you somewhere. Are you ready for that? Or maybe He has tossed you, and you're going to land somewhere, right where God wants you. Just be ready. Keep in the Word, and let God work in your life. Let Him flow over you and smooth your rough edges. We all have rough edges, and we all need to be smoothed out a little more. And I appreciate the pastor asking me to come this morning. My wife's much better at this. And she has a great testimony too. She's got stuff that I don't have enough time. She would tell it better than I would, anyways. But how we wound up here, how we got our homes in California, and was able to have a place to stay there. She's got that. Sometime if you ask me to speak again, I'm going to send you to my wife. Well, thank you very much, and God bless you all, and everyone have a great afternoon.